Um, Before you even get a chance to know me, this is me editing, you know, me from the future. Today is the day that series 5, episode 5 gets released. So I wrote this script, and I say this later on as well, on the Thursday and Friday that episode 4 came out, and I filmed it on Monday. And because I've got university, I have been in and out of editing, but I haven't managed to get it up before today. So it's just kind of a hello, this is me. My name's Alice. I'm a university student doing a television degree, and I wanted to give my kind of newfound opinions on television shows. So yeah, so I'm not going to watch the episode that came out today until I have finished editing. But yeah, so if there's anything that I say that is either already confirmed or already, null and void, please forgive me, because this was all done before then. But I didn't really have much control over it otherwise. So anyway, I'll get on to the actual explanation of what I'm going to do with this episode. Okay, so I have... What about... Excuse me, come back. So I'm just waiting for my script to communicate with me. Hello. There we go. So I've only got 30 minutes before my next lecture starts, so let's get on with the show. So I have this love-hate relationship with a show called Riverdale. Riverdale. You know the one. And it's like, the writing is so bad, but I can't stop watching it. I can't help it, So I've just been sucked into this wormhole of watching Riverdale. I think I started watching it originally when the 3rd episode came out, so I've been there since the start. And I actually got so angry once watching this show that I spent an afternoon rewriting how I thought the series would go. Unfortunately, I think I deleted I didn't delete the document, but I just didn't save it. So it's you can't delete what you didn't save, And I cry about that regularly. But so we got to episode 3 of season 5, which were possibly the worst episodes they've ever written up, but I can kind of understand why. There were some of the worst episodes they have produced. But we were told at the end of that we will be facing a time skip about 6 or 7 years. I was kind of skeptical at first because I know other shows have done that, like Once Upon a Time and Pretty Little Liars, and they kind of act like a clean slate for the series, trying to start again. And in the case of Once Upon a Time, it ended up just being a recreation of the first series. I actually genuinely liked that final season. I thought it had some interesting points, and I think because it worked on the parallels of its first season, there were more things they could get away with. But it's almost like they created an entirely new show, and they could just it was lazy writing in the sense that they could count the people who would watch the show so far would understand what was going on. So they do essentially work as a pilot for a whole new series, which is kind of what this Riverdale thing has done. And it's because we basically re-meet everyone. And I did like the way they showed us these new versions of the characters that we know. I think it added a new level of conflict that we lost throughout the time that we had. I feel like they worked a little too well to leave out. It's they worked so well together in the previous series that it just didn't give us that place for, internal conflict, that it was all external conflict, and that doesn't always make a story very interesting. However, I don't know how this is going to pan out. They look at the moment like they would really have lots of problems trying to get back into the swing of how they used to work as a group. But I'm worried that they'll just suddenly be it was they never left Riverdale, I don't want that. I want conflict. Basically, what I intend to do talking here is I intend to point out where I think they've set up interesting points and interesting plots and interesting new character traits in the show, so that if they don't, it's different, obviously, I may not have thought of every possibility, but it gets to the point of it's if they ignore everything I'm thinking, or they don't find a better way to do it, I can kind of point out and go there was this potential here. You had this set up. You had this in place because you actually wrote an episode well, and you just completely ignored it. You did all this. So it's basically this is me trying to give them my faith that they can be good writers. So we start on this kind of Archie war football field thing, and I kind of like that stylistically. It's not necessarily the most important piece, but it was it definitely showed a lot about Archie and his background. Obviously, we know he went to war. We know how it relates to, him being a football player, an American football player. We know he's a leader, he's loyal, and, you know, he tends to lead by serving rather than, you know, commanding people to do things. And I think it kind of showed a lot about him and his maturity and how he's grown. But it kind of almost feels like he's got like that unhealthy attachment to home and to his childhood, which could leave him being like he still hasn't quite grown up sort of thing, which could lead him to being quite naive. I liked all the colours and compositions of that. There's also this interesting moment between Archie and Cheryl on the field, and this could indicate there's something interesting happening in their relationship, not necessarily like romantically, because of course we're aware that Cheryl is a lesbian. There was that kind of bond between them in the first series, because obviously that, you know, Archie was just the other ginger person who very much could like role as a replacement for her brother. You know, he was football, he was kind of around her age, and it was just interesting seeing that kind of that connection there, because I always wanted them to do more with that. Like, I wanted to explain, was there actually like, you know, a biological link there, which obviously would make Betty and Archie a bit of a trouble, but like, you know what I mean, like I wanted more there because I thought that had an interesting setup. And I think because it lingered long enough that it felt like that was like a nod. So if I did that stylistically, that would be a nod that something is coming in the future in that. And then of course it ends with him kind of face to face with Hiram Lodge. And I'm focusing on this bit because the reason I'm talking so much about this beginning bit, even though it seems quite insignificant in the episode, is that I think that if they're smart, they could use this as the blueprint. Like, this is the foreshadowing for the rest of the series. That it's Archie, you know, he is the one who has to save the day. He has the information. He has the strength to do it. He has his friends cheering him on in the sideline. He has those people there. But in the end, it is him saving the day, and it'll be him versus Hiram. And that's where I think this is kind of leading, that it will end up with one more kind of like showdown face-off with him and Hiram Lodge. And that's just how it's going to be. And one of my amendments, so I was talking about how I wanted to rewrite the show. And that's probably about halfway through season 4, so I didn't know everything that was going to happen. But one of the things that I was going to do was I was going to take out all of Hiram Lodge's story, and it was just all going to be, you know, the bit, because we've already had that kind of Archie, Hiram thing, and Hiram doesn't really feel like the bad guy anymore. But so I would have taken that bit out, and I would have just had all set up, and then have Hiram be like the big bad guy at the end. So I think in terms of the show, I think they've picked, if they are gonna make Hiram like our big bad guy of the season, I think they picked the right person to put there. They have made up someone new, and I'll get to that in a bit, but I think in general, I think it was a good idea to have one of our bad guys be someone that had already had the setup to be there. So I do appreciate that. The only problem I think here is, because we've kind of had this conflict before, is it won't have the same punch that it would have done if he was always going to be the final boss, if you were, because we've already seen this story play out once. So I think that's disappointing, but I still agree with the choice to have him be the kind of the final guy. So moving on, we see Archie waking up. He's being repositioned back into his, you know, hometown for recruitment. I mean, I don't know much about the army, but I have very little inner working knowledge of it. But would they really commission someone else who was still physically looking quite able-bodied? Like, he wasn't torn up like his friend who was on the bed next to him. Like, would they have really sent him home? But I suppose it's just like, it was just a plot, you know, device to get him back to his hometown. So I guess I can kind of let it go by. Yeah, not to be too nitpicky, but I'm holding things accountable for if they don't use this setup, was that he talks to his friend and he holds him, like, gives him his house number, and, you know, says contact me when you're out. So I expect to see him later in the show. So either he is going to be one of the killers, or he's going to be a victim, because we know so little about him. I can't imagine him like joining the gang, but I feel like he will either be like, you know, he'll go to the house, get killed by the ghoulies, and then he'll be, you know, that's the plot of revenge for Archie, or, you know, he's kind of going to be one of the bad guys all along, like he'll get caught up in something. So then we make it back to Pops, and like, because it's obviously the most appropriate spot for him to head back when he gets back into town. You know, see, he needs a little nice shot of him looking back at his old boo. Usually I find the songs at La Bonne Nuit like quite cringy, like they're kind of always really awkward, but there's just something just hits different about like a really strong pregnant woman dressed as a snake dancing. Like, I'm down for it. I like this stylistic change. So here we kind of establish the Left Behind group, that they're the side characters who they're important enough to be around and stick in the show, but not important enough to have their own lives. So we get to see them. There's an annoying setup here too, that we talk about Pop Tate, and Tony gives us this really ominous setup of like, she makes him sound like he's been killed. So my assumption at the start of this episode was that they were going to be investigating Pop Tate's murder, but it just turns out that he's just retiring. And I kind of get it. It probably was done to be a bit of a red herring, but I was just like, knowing them, I can't help but think that wasn't actually an intentional setup, you know? If it was a red herring, then that's fine, but, you know, I don't trust the writers of this anymore. This is when we kind of, it starts to get a little Pretty Little Liars for me, because we get flashed into to the lives of the old friends, and how, you know, they ended up going so far away and how they've changed. You know, we skip, you know, so we skip on now to find out what's going on with Betty, and we get up that she's training with the FBI. She's gone through a negative experience in her training that's not only left her traumatized, has ruined her career. And I think I like this setup. They're getting better at showing and not telling than before. There is a little bit too much telling in some points, but it's like there's a lot of setup. Like, we're not being babied at the moment. And then there's this whole thing with the trash bag killer, and like, I get that that's the literal thing that he does when but it's like, it was just too cartoonish for me. It kind of reminded me like using Jingle Jangle as a drug name. Like, I'm sure there could have been something more interesting. Like, you know, you hear like the you know, the Zodiac killer that has like a hit to it, but the trash bag killer, it just makes him seem like he's a child murderer. Like, because it's just such a, like, if there's any way to kind of talk about how he, like, you know, the disembodied, decapitated, dismembered, like, you know, there are fun words there that you can use to talk about how he killed people, but use the trash bag killer. And even shortening to TBK is like you basically just called him the bin man, you know? Oh, it's just so Riverdale. So now Betty brings up that she's been working through cold cases. I don't get why her partner is so against her kind of trying to set up a theory. I mean, she's going through cold cases. I know she's filing them, but I'm sure she's allowed to work on them. Her investigation entirely, like, if this point was made later on in the film, this guy would be like, how did we not see this before? But I guess it's just being used as setup, that maybe this is an important point later on, that maybe TBK will kind of arrive in Riverdale, and, you know, we'll see that set of killings come up again. And so it will be in Betty's mind that there's a possibility for a migrating serial killer, or maybe that guy is the guy that's going to come to Riverdale. We don't know. So I feel like there's setup there. So this is the new Betty. We get the sense that she's not being trusted for her instincts anymore. She's feeling mostly alone, untrusted. She's in need of redemption. She still has intriguing instincts, but she'll be more hesitant to act on them. She's also been lying to her therapist, blowing off her boyfriend to study case files. We get the idea that she's a bit of a recluse. And I think the way her character should go in this series is either she will be afraid to share her ideas, you know, for repeating the past, kind of following those hunches, or she will continue to lead others into danger and possibly lead them down dead ends, which means that, you know, she's likely again to not be trusted for her instincts, and she will get people in trouble again, which could cause her more trauma, because she hasn't necessarily learnt from her mistakes, because she's still trying to investigate things based on hunches. And if they play this right, I think Betty should end the season feeling redeemed for her past actions by catching TBK or this other migrating killer. Depending on the previous choices, if she's, you know, scared, she should end up following the hunch and then getting it right. But if she's not scared, she should learn to go more by the book and have help from her friends rather than trying to go at it alone, because that might be, I get that feeling she's probably going to try and do a lot of this on her own, which is why I like the fact there's more internal conflict here. Also, there's this mention of Betty's serial killer brother, so I assume, I have a bone to pick with this anyway, because I think this was a really stupid plot point, and there were so many inconsistencies with this, but I assume that because they say that, you know, the lair's been cleaned out, that he's been in prison, and basically I hope that means he's just not coming back. If he comes back, I am throwing hands. There is no need for him to be back in their lives. So here we move on and we meet Veronica, who seems to have continued her bougie lifestyle, so she hasn't, you know, strayed too far into her new Riverdale life. She comes across as a smart, ambitious businesswoman. In a way, she's kind of like she always was, but I like that she's a little bit colder now. She's much more for herself, very business heavy. Like, there was always that kind of innocence to her before. Although I don't think she stooped to her father's level. I think she will be able to play a little bit dirty at times. You know, she'll be willing to do what she wants and will lie to get there. And I like that. Although she's already started calling herself the Wolf of Wall Street too many times, and I just get the feeling that that's going to pop up more throughout the series. We're already on a count of 2, and my bet is she's going to say it in the next episode as well. Just knowing the writers. So I'm calling that one here. And there's this scene between her and her husband that shows a more adult tone to the show. Similar to the energy in the first season, actually. So it's nice to see that we might have a slightly more edgy look here than we have in the last few seasons. And they've created this really resentful energy between her and her husband. Kind of get the feeling that we're not supposed to like him a lot. You know, he says he doesn't want her to be stressed and taking off a lot more work. But in this accident, was she more affected somehow? Like, why is he restraining her? And I just don't really like the husband very much. I was kind of hoping the accident, because it was ambiguous. We felt like they were talking about the accident, the accident. I was kind of hoping that maybe this would be revealed over time, so we could see a little bit of, Veronica actually showing how much she was affected by this, because that is a traumatic thing. And I think while she's trying to say she wasn't affected, I think she definitely has been. She's just not showing it in the way that you'd expect. And I was kind of hoping it will be revealed over time, and we get in the same episode being told what it was. So it's kind of like, I get it, but. I thought it was really weird. I thought it was a really strange choice to have Hermione become a real housewife. It was just such a strange decision and path to go down, but I guess whatever. But if this were the pilot of a first episode, if this was a whole new series, a whole new show, that would be an amazing way to introduce the lifestyle that Veronica lives, knowing that her mum is basically a real housewife. So in that terms, I think that's quite cool, but because we already know Hermione launched, it was just so cringy and weird. It was really cringe. I'm not sure what the potential for Veronica is. She has this new need to feel busy and useful, and I feel like it was untrue for her character. She didn't spend a lot of this season complaining about how she needs to return to work, being, bugged by her needy husband. I reckon she could bring quick thinking to the group. She's capable working in those high stress situations. I assume the relationship with her husband won't last very long, but I'll need to wait. I think we need to wait 4 episodes to kind of work out what's going on with Veronica. Jughead, I'll admit, I don't like him anymore, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. He is in dire need of redemption. He's out of money, he owes it to bad people, his career's dead-ended, his relationship is over. He's kind of fallen down in the same path as his father, being an alcoholic, angry, and making immoral deals. I think it does the previous Jughead a little dirty, but if we're coming on this thing that it's basically like a pilot for a new show, this is amazing character setup for a new character. It plays into the right pockets. We get the right amount of character setup. If I showed this to someone who hadn't watched Riverdale, they would understand who this new Jughead was without needing to know who the old one was. He is an entirely different person. And I'm intrigued to see what will happen with him. The girlfriend doesn't seem to have an overly important role at this stage. Of course, she could come back to create later conflict if he tries to get with Betty or someone else. But I kind of hope they leave it there. I feel like she deserves better. And I feel like, while I don't like people being just plot devices, sometimes you do need that thing of, she was there to show how much of a waste of space he's become. It's just this hunch. But the girl that he makes this deal with, she's followed him around, she's stalked him, she's read all his articles, she knows a lot about him. She was willing to use alcohol and sex to get her way. I think she might be more than just someone who's going to cause extra conflict for him. Of course, we know she has the ability to screw him over, because she will, and I'm saying that she will call those debt collectors, and they will come after Jughead. That is going to happen. Maybe not because he doesn't hand it in time, but maybe because he doesn't do something exactly the way she wants it to, so she actually uses it as leverage again. But I have a feeling, because we know she's not below blackmail, lying, manipulation, stalkerish, I think she might be more involved. I have this weird hunch as well, and I'm only putting this in so I can sound really big-brained if it's right, but I have a feeling that she might play on Cheryl. So if she does turn up in Riverdale and she is the bad guy and not just a red herring, I think there'd be I just have a hunch that something that's going to happen there. But again, that's just how I would do it if I was the writer. This is all it is. This is just if I was the writer. Also, so much for Jughead being asexual in the comics. I mean, I know they screwed that up already, but this just takes it out of being Demi as well, But now he has this conflict of interest. If he gets too sucked into this new murder, he's going to get tracked down by the people who he owes. But I feel like Veronica will help out in this situation. I hope she doesn't just give them the money and they go away. I hope that it gets to that point where she can use her negotiation skills and that quick thinking to help here. And he'll definitely end the series by writing everything that's just happened into a book out of their latest mystery. You can tell he's really based his last bestseller off of Riverdale, so that's just how it's going to end. Now we get the quick summation of those who've been left behind. I hope Kevin and Fangs get married, you know. And then we head to Cheryl's story. Quickly, I'd like to add that I'm happy that they're bringing the serpents back. I think they really let go of it, and I like the fact that we've set them up again. There's this serpents versus Hiram and the Ghoulies. We have their new hideout, their new safe haven, which will be ruined by the Ghoulies at some point. It will be trashed by the Ghoulies. That's just how it works. So we see Cheryl looking very much like a Disney villain, wearing all black, because usually all she wears is red, and she wears red in the other flashbacks. So the black means that someone has died. Maybe her mum. I also get this weird feeling that her nan is actually dead. Because, I mean, Tony doesn't look at her in that one shot that they're in together. So I just have this weird feeling that she is hallucinating her nana there. And her nana's being really, really dodgy as well. Like, she wasn't like, this was the only good person that Cheryl had. We see a few key things in Cheryl. She's at odds with Hiram, which may means she has power over him because she's actually able to hold her own. She has a good memory. She's able to keep track of Tony and all the things that she do. So who knows what else she's memorized. And she has this skill at painting, particularly painting replicas. I have this feeling this might come in useful somehow, that they can use it like a plan between Veronica and Cheryl, where they can like scam Hiram, giving him a priceless piece of art, but it's actually a fake. Maybe she could forge a signature, something along those lines. And I'd be upset if they don't use her skill in this somehow. Like, I want to know where that's going. Cheryl is still being held back by her family. I think she has every reason to. Like, I mean, I hate everything they did with her family, but at the same time, she has every reason to be traumatized and held back by her family. But in isolation, so away from the rest of the series, her phrasing of explanation could make her quite useful, because she'll be willing to make up for her, like, the debt of her family and all the horrible things that they have done. So she might be willing to do things for them, like make that deal with Veronica to help like scam Hiram, or she might be against doing things illegal because she doesn't want to feel like she's being dragged down into their illegal paths. So she could be quite like a moral grey area in this season. And again, in my rewriting Riverdale, one of the things that I wanted to do as well was to basically just cut Cheryl out. Like, not entirely, but I think she should be more somber. She shouldn't have bounced back as quickly as she did. She's gone through so much, and they still characterized her as like really like perky, and I just didn't get it. I'd still like make her like stubborn and like business savvy. I like the fact that she's like, they're really playing into that she's broken now, and it just makes sense based on her past. Anyway, so despite the fact that there's bound to be a new murdering spree, our other problem is that, as I've mentioned before, is Hiram. The jury is currently out on whether he'll be working with the murderer, as he has kind of done. Like, there's always been that thing before of the murderers working with someone orchestrating the rest of the town. So I have that feeling that that might be a part of it. So we see what Riverdale has become, and it's somewhat like season 2 and maybe season 3, but I actually can't remember what happened in season 3. I feel like the crew will be too busy to want to really investigate this. There'll be a lot of Archie kind of going off on his own, in the same way that he's kind of been given this tour of Riverdale, that I think it will be his adventure to try and build Riverdale back up, and that is why he will end up being Hiram's big opposition. And, you know, because like he's the one who is trying to basically undo everything Hiram has done in the last 7 years. So this will be his plot, and this will cause him the trouble, because sometimes he might be needed in this murder investigation, but he's too busy being somewhere else. And if that dream is a premonition, I think that would make a lot of sense. So we get back to Pops again. You know, the gang is back together. We've got the benched shoulder with a Captain America-like sense for good justice, the disgraced agent with trauma and a need to be right, the dirty businesswoman who will do anything to get her way, and the penniless author who will need a good story and a place to hide. And we have the gang leader who has the history of the town and a heart of gold. And I really like that they seem to, like, I really hope that they keep Tony around as a main character. I think she was too sidelined in the past, and I think she has the perfect reason to be in this group, because she is the one who have the knowledge of everything that has happened. And then we're left with this ominous message of a girl called Squeaky who's just trying to find her way in life, and it ends with, "She will never make it to California." Now, this girl seems to be wearing a wig. We don't see a dead body at the end, and I haven't seen the trailer for the next one at recording this, so I wonder if she's in disguise Because I would hope the hair and makeup team, because she's quite obviously wearing a wig, and you would hope that the hair and makeup team wouldn't be that bad at giving her a wig. Like, I feel like it's supposed to look like it's not her hair, in the same way that Veronica, when Veronica wore the blonde wig, you could tell it wasn't her hair. It didn't look natural. So I feel like that must have been done on purpose. So it means that she's someone else. So it either means that maybe she doesn't dye here and she'll pop up later somewhere else and she'll, you know, have her natural hair. I don't want to use the kind of sense that she's accomplice again, because I've already kind of used that for one or two of the other side characters that have popped up. But it's like there's something there. Like, the only thing I could think of is that she kind of looked like the girl in the murder case with Betty, you know, with Betty's trash bag killer. So I wonder if maybe there's a thing there that maybe she didn't actually die, and that was, maybe she is the accomplice. I don't know. It's setting up to say that she's dead, so she probably is dead, but there is going to be another side to her story. Because she's wearing a wig, it means that she's getting that fresh start, that new identity. She isn't going to be just the girl Squeaky who died. There's going to be more to her story that will relate probably to something that Betty has studied. And also, one last point, we see her getting into a truck, so I can only assume that the truck is on the road that Tony mentioned earlier about like, no one will go here, no one will go down this road, it's their lonely highway. So I assume if she does indeed get killed there, this may not be the first person who's been killed in this way. So that, you know, I'm assuming that possibly that this truck driver will be our killer. And I think that, I mean, that's the obvious thing. This truck driver will be our killer. It would make sense for him to be a migrating killer, maybe not the migrating killer, but we've had this set up. It's possible that this wasn't the first murder here, so it makes sense that if that murder, you know, that murderer, that migrating killer disappeared, why he hasn't been found again recently, because who is going to look at Riverdale and, you know, in the way that it is now, when it's like, you know, filled with wreck and, you know, homeless people, and it's just destroyed, who is really going to be investigating any murders that happen there? Like, it's just fallen to the pits. So that's my assumption there, that this is where her migrating killer might have gone. But of course, you know, the trash bag killer hasn't been found, so maybe I can't say they're the same person, because otherwise she would have worked that out, because we know that she's smart and she can catch serial killers. But I haven't decided which one is going to be our killer here. But they'll both be important somehow, even if it's just that the one she was studying in her basement was just set up. To wrap it all up, this was me trying to find the plot points that could be made during a show, during this next season of the show. These are the plot points that could be important at some point or another. Now, there may be ones that I have missed because I'm still kind of new at analysing in this way. So I'd like to make that like a point, that I know it's not perfect. I probably won't have predicted everything, and I haven't necessarily tried to predict everything. What I'm trying to do here is just skim across the surface. I watched it 2 or 3 times before, you know, while writing this, and you know, while editing as well. But I really want to just skim the surface to see what plot points seemed obvious to me, and also what could be set up. So even though I don't know exactly what's going to happen, set up for the characters is just as important as foreshadowing. And I think if any of these points, I mean, not all of these points will be useful, but I would like to do an assessment later on to show if they've actually bothered with some of the writing, because this here shows that this show could have had potential the whole time, unless they've, you know, just hired new writers, and I hadn't looked that up, which is, you know, could be possible. But it's like, this is the potential the show might have had the whole time, and this is good setup for a new story. And I will be sorely disappointed if some of these things that I've brought up don't get addressed at all, because otherwise what was the point in putting them in the first place? That is one of the number one rules of like writing a story, is don't put things in there that won't be necessary. So for example, as why I keep harking on to this migrating killer, is that it may not be important. He may not be the guy that we go after, but they wouldn't have put him in it if that point wasn't important. And the point I was making there is that serial killers can move around. So if that doesn't get addressed, if there is no migrating serial killer, even if they don't even have to say that, oh, he's migrating, he's moving around, but like, you know, it's important setup. There was no point in putting that in there if it wasn't going to get paid off eventually. But anyway, so this will probably go. I don't know what date it will be by the time I get this up. It is currently Monday. I wrote this script on the Thursday and Friday of the release of season 5, episode 4. So if I put this up after season 5, episode 5, know that it was highly and entirely produced before then. And I might try and come back and do a similar video once it's all wrapped up. So we'll have to wait and see on that one, won't we? But if you found this interesting, you know what to do.